Hey, this is Jonathan Fields, host of the Good Life Project podcast. Boost Mobile reminds me of what I love, when someone reimagines what's possible. They have invested billions in building America's newest 5G network, becoming the country's fourth major carrier. They are doing things differently, offering a $25 monthly unlimited plan that never increases in price and letting you try their service risk-free for 30 days. With blazing fast 5G and plans for all the latest devices, they're changing the game. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find them online at boostmobile.com. The Boost Mobile network, together with their roaming partners, covers 99% of the U.S. population. 5G speeds not available in all areas.
Now at Verizon, we have some big news for your peace of mind. For all our customers, existing and new, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on My Plan and My Home. That's future you peace of mind. And everyone can save on a brand new phone on My Plan when you trade in any phone from one of our top brands. That's new phone peace of mind. Because at Verizon, whether you're already a customer or you're just joining us, we got you. Visit Verizon today. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Hello and welcome to episode number 276 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And to kick things off this week, I would like to say thanks to some of our newest Patreon subscribers. I would like to thank Sophie Fletcher, Kimby Bruce Alexander Ramsey, Faye Gibb, Catherine Robertson, Cyclops Siren, Zach Aguirre, Scott Cave, Liesel Manone, Ellie, Merlin89, Roger, Aaron Campbell, Deanna Rocks Most, Sarah, and Leanne Paradise. Thank you so much for subscribing to the Patreon. I love you and appreciate you every single day. And our film review this week, our film review is Dead Silence. Dead Silence was released in 2007. It has 6.1 out of 10 on IMDb and a whopping 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. After his wife meets a grisly end, Jamie Ashen returns to their creepy hometown of Ravens Fair to unravel the mystery of her murder. Once there, he discovers the legend of Mary Shaw, a murdered ventriloquist whose eerie presence still looms over the town. As he desperately digs for answers, Jamie encounters the curse that took his wife's life and threatens his own. Now, look, right, I'm going to say this here and now, okay? This film is not good, but it is also wildly entertaining. It can be both at the same time. And you know, the opening scene, the opening sequence is genuinely fun to watch. Like, I'm not that fussed about haunted dolls or ventriloquist dummies. They don't particularly scare me. But there's a lot of good horror stuff going on in this opening sequence, and it really dives right in. There's not a lot of backstory. There's not a lot of exposition to get through. It just starts with a bang. We start with a straight up, full on, gruesome, gory murder. And of course, there's something obviously very disconcerting. If you move into a new house, which is what has happened to these two, they've moved into their new house. At least I think that's what happened. But anyway, they get this weird, mysterious package, and it's a ventriloquist dummy, right? And shit hits the fan immediately. Like, that's freaky. I'm here for it. And I kind of thought, God, this might actually be a good film. Was it? No. But was it fun? Like I said, yes. There are some genuinely creepy moments in this. There are moments of real dread. There are some good jump scares that are like relevant to the plot and not just kind of thrown in there unnecessarily. And I thought to myself, I'm having a good time. I am very into early 2000s mystery solving style of horror films at the moment, right? Those films where if you can solve the mystery, you can save yourself. I can get on board with that. Think about The Grudge. You solve the mystery, you save yourself. Think about The Ring. Think about films like Gothica, where something scary is happening and you've got to figure it out within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you're going to be next. I'm here for it. If you like that kind of movie, then this is absolutely for you. I don't know if it's actually for you, because you know, the more I think about it and the more I thought about this film afterwards, it's not actually that great. But like I said, it is sort of endlessly amusing. And in terms of dislikes, right, look, it's all a bit shite really, but the bad bits are still endlessly amusing. Like, the acting was relatively weak at times, and I had absolutely no emotional ties to a single character. The main character, his wife, dies, like literally dies gruesomely. Sorry, spoiler alert. It happens in the first scene. He doesn't seem to be remotely fazed by it. He's fine. Like, he's all right. And bear in mind, these two, this couple, this husband and wife, this young couple who are recently married, they grew up in this town of Ravens Fair, where throughout their time, people have been murdered seemingly, you know, because of this ventriloquist dummy. But yet, when a mysterious ventriloquist dummy arrives to their house with no note, neither of them are in any way perturbed. I think given their history, I'd be thinking, oh, this is a bit shit actually. I don't know if I want this ventriloquist dummy in my flat, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if I'm going to sleep soundly with this glazed-eyed motherfucker sitting on the other side of the room, where I've inexplicably propped him up on a chair facing the bed. And as with all of these like early 2000s mystery solving horror films, there's a lot of exposition, and we learn the story, the legend of Ravens Fair, which again is not a secret. So the fact that our protagonist seems shocked by the events that have allegedly unfolded in the past is beyond me. People have been dying in Ravens Fair left, right and centre because of this legend. And yet, he and his wife seem to be the only two people who were blissfully unaware of this. I fundamentally do not understand how the writers of this film got to this point and nobody pointed out the obvious. The husband is also accused of murdering his wife, right? Which makes sense. You can understand why. And I honestly think the best and most dreadful thing about this film is the detective who thinks that Jamie has murdered his wife. Because he is a one-man police department, apparently. He is highly trained in making clever quips and shaving his face. Because the entire way through the film, he is shaving with an electric shaver. Every time we see him, he is shaving. It made me laugh the entire way through the film. And there is so much shoddy police work to be seen in this film. This man is accused of his wife's murder. I get it. It makes sense. And he's only apparently being investigated by this one man who does whatever he wants. He's digging up graves. He is chasing Jamie around the place. He's stealing ventriloquist dummies. Like I said, you know, digging up graves. I think that's pretty shocking to do as a one-man police department, a vigilante police officer. And I'm not going to lie, I actually think this film is worth watching specifically to watch this police officer, because it is just so bloody entertaining. And look, there's an absurdity to this film, right? I also thought the plot was quite obvious, but it was so fun to watch. Like, it was so stupid, but so entertaining. Like, I have to give it sort of 2 stars for the actual craft of the film. Oh, but in terms of enjoyment, it was like 10 stars, genuinely. So that's 2 stars for Dead Silence. Look, if you're into it, if you love a, you know, early 2000s kind of cheesy mystery solving horror film and you want a horror film to watch with friends, this is the one for you. And I also wanted to say, okay, you're going to get a double whammy this week. And I wanted to say this before it's out of cinemas. Go and see 28 Years Later if you have not seen it already. I'm going to do a proper review of it next week, but I wanted to say here and now, if you have not seen 28 Years Later, go and see it. I am probably the biggest 28 Days Later fan. I absolutely adored that film so much. As a horror film, as a film in general, I just absolutely adore it. 28 Years Later lives up to the hype. It is everything you would want from a 28 Days Later sequel. Honestly, just go and see it. Go and see it, enjoy it, see it in the cinema. You will love it. That is my recommendation. I will do a proper review next week, but I just wanted to get it in there for people to go and see 28 Years Later and enjoy it, because that is a 10-star film for sure.
Now at Verizon, we have some big news for your peace of mind. For all our customers, existing and new, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on My Plan and My Home. That's future you peace of mind. And everyone can save on a brand new phone on My Plan when you trade in any phone from one of our top brands. That's new phone peace of mind. Because at Verizon, whether you're already a customer or you're just joining us, we got you. Visit Verizon today. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.
Residents at Brightview Senior Living Communities enjoy enhanced possibilities, independence, and choice. Brightview Dulles Corner in Herndon and Brightview, Great Falls, offer vibrant senior independent living, assisted living, and memory care services through various daily programs and cultural events. Chef-prepared meals, safety and security, transportation, resort-style amenities, and high-quality care. Everything you need is here. Discover more at brightviewseniorliving.com. Equal housing opportunity.
I can't tell you how often I hear, oh, I'm a little OCD. I like things neat. That's not OCD. I'm Howie Mandel, and I know this because I have OCD. Actual OCD causes relentless unwanted thoughts. What if I did something terrible and forgot? What if I'm a bad person? Why am I thinking this terrible thing? It makes you question absolutely everything, and you'll do anything to feel better. OCD is debilitating, but it's also highly treatable with the right kind of therapy. Regular talk therapy doesn't cut it. OCD needs specialized therapy. That's why I want to tell you about NoCD. NoCD is the world's largest virtual therapy provider for OCD. Their licensed therapists provide specialized therapy virtually, and it's covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans. If you think you might be struggling with OCD, visit nocd.com to schedule a free 15-minute call and learn more. That's nocd.com.
Quince believes that quality products shouldn't be a luxury, whether it's a breathable 100% European linen shirt or effortless stretch cotton pants. All of their high-end, top-quality pieces are about half the cost of similar brands. Yes, really. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury pieces without the markup. Get the high-end goods you deserve at quince.com/upgrade for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Which brings us to our story this week. Now, our story this week is going to contain many badly pronounced words, and you will see why as soon as we begin. And today we are visiting somewhere that I don't think we have ever been on the podcast before. We are deep diving into a Swedish ghost story, and I've been racking my brain. I don't think I've ever visited Sweden before on the podcast. So let's get into it. Over frigid seas and stormy weather lies some of the world's most secluded and remote outcrops of civilization. And it is to one of them, right at the tip of the most northern parts of Sweden, that we venture off to today. Wind-swept plains and snow-filled embankments encase the tiny village of Borgvattnet, a place that only around 50 people now call home. To get there is a journey in and of itself. Those of us not lucky enough to own our own cars would be forced to take the train from the not so nearby city of Östersund, and that's if we're lucky enough to catch one, as they only run on weekdays and at odd hours. But once we've made it there, we're sure to be charmed by the sprawling landscape. In the winter we would find crisp white snow piled up high and almost shining in the sun. In the summer, we'd see green grass and flowery hills, a sight straight out of midsummer. And jutting out from the virtually untouched scenery, we would also find the striking church tower, buried right in the heart of the village of Borgvattnet itself. This church, with its whitewashed walls and rising cross, marks itself out as the tallest building in the area, and sits perched on top of a sloping hill, overlooking Lake Borgsjön. It was built in 1782 by master builder Pal Persson from the municipality of Stugun. An influential figure himself, Pal is believed to be a member of the Stugus family, the family who gave the municipality of Steugun its name, and were responsible for the spiritual lodge that would house pilgrims on their way to the legendary Nidaros Cathedral in Norway. He would go on to build many other churches and towers just like the one at Borgvattnet, but that particular church was the first time that Pál had ventured into the world of ecclesiastical construction all on his own. It was a major success, and from it, Pál launched his influential career that had his buildings littered across the country. But in so many ways, his church, in little and some would argue mostly forgotten, Borgvattnet, has been his lasting legacy. Perhaps because the church seems determined to create a legacy of its own. It goes without saying that every church needs a spiritual leader to run it and guide the flock who attend its services. In Borgvattnet's case, that spiritual leader is a vicar, and this vicar, like so many others all across Christendom, would need a place to live. Alongside the churchyard is the Nordic-style vicarage, with its wooden planked exterior and squared windows. It would be the official homestead for generations of clergymen and their families. It was built at the same time as the church, and their histories and story went hand in hand with each other until the vicarage and the holy building it had been built to support split ways. It was just over 100 years later that the vicarage would separate itself from the church. The year was 1907, and Vicar Per Hedlund lived in the cabin with his growing family. Unlike with the Catholic Church, vicars of the Church of Sweden are allowed to marry and have children, and Per had done both of those things. In fact, his wife Marta was in one of the rooms giving birth to the newest addition of their family. Fate, however, would rear its unfortunate head and snatch Marta away in the middle of childbirth. Per was absolutely devastated. Riddled with grief, he couldn't bear to be parted from his deceased wife, and had her buried in the back garden rather than the cemetery grounds not too far away. Marta wasn't laid to rest on hallowed ground, and that was a crime, not just against her, but against the very religion that her husband Per was supposed to preach. Her burial remained a secret for only a few days, until some of the others in the village caught wind of it and challenged Per. Per was ordered to exhume his wife and rebury her in the church cemetery. He reluctantly agreed, but when the villagers returned to the vicarage the following day, Per, his children, and Marta's body had all disappeared. It was about 20 years later, when Per had finally joined his wife in the afterlife, that his son Niels Hedlund returned to Borgvattnet. Niels was the new vicar at the very same church his father had once preached in, and now the vicarage across the yard was his home yet again. He must have been happy at first, and probably stayed that way for the most part as the years went on, but Niels's letters also documented the very first signs of what was to come. Somewhere in the back of Niels' mind must have always sat the fact that his mother had died in the house that he now lived in. He must have heard whispers of her memory. He must have felt it like a nagging thought every time he went into the room that she passed away in. He must have felt that she was always there, in the corner of his eye. But then again, maybe she was. In letters, Niels wrote about a strange and unexplainable incident that occurred while he was alone in the vicarage. The sun had been out that day, and not a breath of wind could be felt. Nevertheless, Niels had his washing out to dry on the lines in the back garden. The only problem was that the laundry wasn't exactly going to stay that way. Niels knew that there wasn't any wind, and yet as he watched his laundry hanging on the lines, he could see it rippling, almost like someone was trailing their fingers across it. Then that rippling turned into a full-on tug, and his laundry was yanked off the line. Niels could never really explain what he saw that day, but it always stuck with him. Something about it all told him that it had been his mother who had visited him. Perhaps she wasn't quite satisfied with the condition of his sheets. But whether it was the ghost of long-lost Martha or not, the spirit wouldn't rest when her son left the vicarage and passed it on to the next clergyman in residence, Rudolf Tangden. Around 1930, Rudolf was alone in the vicarage when he suddenly saw a woman walking towards him. He didn't recognise her, but saw her clearly enough to see her face and noticed that she was dressed all in grey. He leapt to his feet and attempted to block her path, not out of anger or because he was about to demand that she leave his house, but because he wanted to see if she needed anything. The woman, however, made a quick turn and headed for what's now known as the expedition room, which once functioned as the vicar's office space. Rudolf followed behind, but as soon as he stood at the threshold of the room, the woman vanished. Rudolf was stunned, but he kept his experience close to his chest. It wouldn't do to have a vicar of Christ spreading a word about a haunting now, would it? That was why Otto Lindgren and his wife had no idea what they were getting into when they moved into the vicarage in 1936. They never saw the lady in grey themselves, but they were almost certain that they had heard her. They heard many things, actually. Often they heard people walking around the house when both of them were sitting in the same room. They heard doors opening and closing all on their own. They once heard someone come in through the front door, but when they went to greet them, there was no one there. One day, when Mrs. Lindgren was alone in the house, she heard music coming from the kitchen. She went to investigate, but as soon as she opened the kitchen door, the music suddenly stopped. She made no mention of it to her husband, but after he came home that evening, the same thing happened again, and they were both there to witness it. The Lindgrens, for whatever reason, never saw a spirit or an apparition during their time at the vicarage, but that's not to say that others didn't. Inga Floden, the diocese secretary, stayed in the vicarage while she was in Borgvattnet on business in 1941. She wasn't a local and wouldn't have heard the stories, but I think it's pretty safe to say that she left the village a believer in the paranormal. She claimed that it was about 3 a.m. when she woke up to an eerie feeling that she was being watched. Instinct kicked in and she turned towards the unfamiliar sofa on the opposite side of the unfamiliar guest room and came face to face with 3 women. Their eyes locked and curiosity got the better of Inga. She turned on the light and realised that though she could still see them clearly, she could also see straight through the 3 women in front of her. It became instantly clear that what she was seeing were the spirits of 3 deceased women. 2 of them, the woman in black and the woman in purple, sat with their hands in their laps. The third, the lady in grey, sat behind them knitting. The very same lady that Rudolf Tangden had seen decades before. Inga claimed that even though the women seemed to be sad, she didn't feel at all threatened or frightened by them. The 4 of them simply stayed in that one room together in silence until Inga drifted off back to sleep and then she woke up totally alone. Inga didn't believe that the spirits of these 3 women had come there to do her any harm, but it was clear that there was an uptake in activity happening in the vicarage. The following vicar, Eric Lindgren, would immediately find that out for himself when he moved in 1945. It was his very first night in the cabin, and he was totally alone. He only had with him a few earthly possessions, and his furniture had yet to arrive. It would be a long night on a borrowed mattress, but Eric would tough it out. He almost didn't think much about the noises at first, but then they grew too loud to ignore. Eric could hear someone upstairs. This time it wasn't just footsteps or even music like the Lindgrens before him had experienced, but it was a full-on welcoming committee. Eric heard the distinct sounds of heavy furniture being dragged from one room to another room across the ceiling above him. He couldn't help himself. He knew he was alone, and he knew that his own furniture hadn't arrived yet. But what if he was misremembering things? He went upstairs to investigate, only to find the upstairs rooms completely empty. From his very first night there, Eric knew that there was something not quite right about the vicarage. He documented every unusual incident in his diary, but the most outrageous one came when he bought himself a new rocking chair. The day was done, and Eric was tired. What he wanted most in life was to sit down in his new chair with a good book and read the rest of the evening away. He plopped himself down in his seat and opened the cover, only to have the rocking chair upended and to find himself on the floor. Eric was stunned, but he collected himself. It was a new chair, after all, and he could have miscalculated. He sat himself back down on the chair, but the exact same thing happened again. Eric realised that he was being pushed by invisible hands, and he never used that rocking chair again. He would, however, still see it rocking on its own from time to time. And it was Eric and his diary that would put the Borgvattnet Vicarage on the map, only 2 years later, when a journalist from a local paper cornered him at a meeting for the local county agricultural society. This journalist had heard rumours about the vicarage's haunted lineage, and who better to ask than the current vicar in residence. Eric found himself plainly asked in a room full of his peers whether his home was haunted. It was a tricky situation. Men of God didn't just go around openly talking about paranormal activity, let alone admit that he was currently living in the midst of a real-life haunting. But Eric rose to the challenge. He turned to the journalist and gave an honest answer. Yes, the vicarage was haunted, and yes, Eric had experienced more than his fair share of unusual and unexplainable events. He told the journalist about the rocking chair, about hearing strange noises, about his candles being blown out for seemingly no reason. And he told him about the time that he had felt like he'd bumped into someone while walking down an empty corridor. He told him about the footsteps that he would often hear heading towards the cabin, only to find that no one was there. And he told him about the expedition room. According to Eric, things in the expedition room never quite felt right. Whenever he was in there, he could never shake the feeling that he was being watched, especially when he was working. Sometimes it felt like someone was peering over his shoulder as he wrote or as he read. Sometimes it felt like someone was sitting right beside him. And let's not forget that the expedition room is where Rudolph Tangden first saw the lady in grey walk into and then disappear from. And in more recent times, a tall man wearing black clothes and donning a hat has been seen in and around the room as well. But back in 1947, the journalist that Eric had spoken to printed Eric's story, which then prompted more people to come forward about their own experiences in the vicarage. And then the rumours that it was haunted became a widely known fact. Borgvattnet Vicarage grew more famous than the church it was attached to. Some would argue even more famous than the man who had built it. Nearly 30 years after Eric and his story became a national sensation, an entrepreneur, ironically also named Eric, bought up the premises. Eric Branholmes then transformed the property into a hotel and opened it up to the public. The first summer that it was operational, it had over 5,000 visitors. Some would find themselves staying in what is now called the Yellow Room, believed to be the room where this story all started. It's said that it was in the Yellow Room that Martha Headland passed away. If the rumours are to be believed, it is also where Per kept her body in his grief, possibly for a long time before he decided to bury her in the garden. Those who have stayed in the Yellow Room claim to sometimes see an indentation on their bedsheets, almost like someone was sitting on them or had just gotten up. Some say that they have felt someone pulling on their clothes. Perhaps it's Martha's way of suggesting that they go and wash them again. Those who have stayed in the hotel's Blue Room say that they are often woken up in the dead of night to the loud groan of heavy furniture being moved around. Some claim to have had their bed sheets whipped off them while they slept, possibly by the ghost of a mischievous young boy who can also sometimes be seen there. But on a more tragic note, in the Pink Room, some guests say that they sometimes hear a baby screaming or are overcome with a feeling of sadness and loss. It is believed that at the end of the 19th century, a 19-year-old girl found herself locked inside that very same room. She was heavily pregnant and unmarried. Worse yet, it said that the father of her baby was one of the priests. She gave birth in that Pink Room, either to a stillborn or to have her baby killed shortly after for the sake of reputation. Her own fate remains a mystery, but it's said that both she and the spirit of her baby still linger in that room. The hotel itself was almost an overnight success, but wanting to nip it and any other burgeoning occult phenomena in the area in the bud, priest Tore Forsland arrived in Borgvattnet in 1981. He attempted to rid the vicarage of the spirits who still haunted it, but it's pretty safe to say that his efforts were largely unsuccessful. Today, Borgvattnet Vicarage is known as one of the most, if not the most, haunted places in Sweden. It is now currently owned by a Swedish paranormal investigation team called LaxTon Ghost Sweden, who continue to operate it as a hotel. You can still book a room or even the whole house if you're feeling brave enough. You could see Eric Lindgren's infamous rocking chair. You could sneak a peek at the bi-weekly services still held in the church next door. Or you could do what most people seem to do and have a go at communicating with someone beyond the veil. And then have a taste of some homemade waffles. Either way, those who make it through the night will be given a certificate at checkout. Make sure you keep yours proudly on display. I just want to say to all of the Swedish people listening, I don't know how many of you there are. 5 maybe. If you are listening, I'm sorry for the terrible pronunciation. I tried my best. I tried really hard, but it was very, very difficult. I also wanted to say I've never been to Sweden, but I can only imagine that it is incredibly beautiful. I've been in the northerly most part of Norway. Obviously, I know not the same country, but sort of geographically and physically is obviously right next door. It borders the northernmost tip of Sweden, and I mean, the landscape is just out of this world. And I've only been there in the depths of winter when it's sort of twilighty all the time. It never really gets bright. You don't really get daytime, and it's honestly magical. It just is unlike anything I've ever experienced. So I would love to visit in the height of summer when you've got these rolling green fields and flowers everywhere and it's sunlight all the time. Oh my God, I would love it. I feel like this place is going to have to be on my paranormal bucket list. Borgvattnet Vicarage in the very northern tip of Sweden. You do not hear very many people talking about that. So that's going to have to be on my bucket list. Although it is at the point now where my paranormal bucket list is genuinely absurd. But I would recommend, if you have the capacity to get to that part of the world, by all means, go. It's beautiful, it's stunning, it's breathtaking. And to kick off my thoughts about this story, I'm going to say something which I think maybe some people will find weird or controversial. It is not meant to be, I promise. But I don't find it weird that Per Hedlund wanted to keep his wife's body close to him. I don't find it weird that he buried her in the garden. I don't find it weird that there's a possibility he kept her body for a period of time before burying her in the garden. And I know that some people will be like, oh my God, that is grim, that is freaky, that's a dead body, it's a corpse, it's disgusting. But I've said this before, in Irish culture, when somebody dies in your family, often that body will immediately be taken and prepared and then brought back to the house, and you spend a couple of days with an open casket with the body in your house, right? That not everybody does that anymore, but that is often what happens. So I don't know whether it's the fact that I'm Irish and I've experienced being around dead bodies since I was a child for my entire life, I don't find that particularly weird, because you sort of want to have a bit of time with that person. I also would like to point out that for many years before Dan died, I did tell him that if he died, I would have him taxidermied. But I did not do that. I opted not to. I thought people would find it strange if I had a taxidermied man in my house. And I do understand that this part of the story comes with context. Do you know what I mean? It's a particular period of time, and to not bury somebody on hallowed ground was seen as like an awful thing to do. You know, it's 1907. People are thinking, oh my God, you've buried her in the garden. You haven't even buried her in consecrated ground. She's not going to get to heaven. You know, people are going to have all those thoughts about it. But I personally, you know, if God is real, if there's a big beardy man in the sky, I don't know if there is or not, but if he is real, I doubt that he's going to be thinking, you were a really good person, but unfortunately you were buried in the wrong place, which you've no control over after you die, just to be clear. So therefore you are not getting into heaven. I just don't really think that's going to be how it works. And it did also remind me of a particular story, and I've left a link to this story in the description. And this is all a bit grim, so, you know, brace yourself for a couple of minutes. If you want to maybe skip about 5 minutes. It did kind of loosely, and this is a complete aside, remind me of the story of Karl Tanzler. So Karl Tanzler was a man who fell in love with a woman called Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos. And she had TB, and she was in the Key West hospital, and then he was a technician, and he fell in love with her, and she died in 1931, and he became completely obsessed with her. So he spent a year sitting by the mausoleum he had commissioned for her every single evening, singing to her, talking with her, and then eventually in April 1933 he exhumed her body and took her home. And he sort of, I mean, this is wild, right? This is like, he wired her limbs together and stuffed her, and, you know, for 7 years kept that body and treated her as though she was alive. And obviously the desecration of a corpse is an absolutely horrendous thing to do, and for her family it must have been hideous when they found out that this is what happened. And this man was just completely obsessed with her, just loved her to the extent of madness, and just could not bear to imagine a life without her. That doesn't excuse what he did, because what he did is grim and, you know, absolutely just horrendous. And when he was arrested, he, you know, was deemed fit to stand trial, despite the fact that he said that he wanted to take her to space to try and bring her back to life. Anyway, that is a total aside, and not really that relevant to this story, but I just think that when people die, sometimes people do strange things, they do weird things, they, you know, grieve in ways that might not be seen as societally acceptable, and they can't let go, and they can't let go of bodies, and, you know, I think all that stuff happens probably more often than we might be aware of. And it seems that part of this legend about this place is that the body was taken, that Marta's body was removed from the house, and nobody knows where it ended up. So I find it a bit mad that the son would come back to the village, despite the fact that everyone would know it was his son, despite the fact that everyone would know that, you know, dad took mum's body and the kids and left, and we still don't really know what happened to the body. Although, you know what these stories are like. These stories will often grow legs, and, you know, a whole narrative is invented along the way, which kind of also makes them fun and interesting and fascinating to pass down. But it does seem like the history of hauntings is pretty substantial. You know, we've got the clothesline, the clothes of the sheets on the clothesline being yanked off the clothesline. That's the kind of shit I'd be doing if I was haunting somebody. Really annoying stuff that would wind me up. I've got very particular ways of doing things. Like, I've got a particular way of making my bed. I've got a particular way of keeping things in my house. And if you're not abiding by that, I'm going to annoy you. I'm going to make your life a misery. And I think it's really interesting that multiple people have seen this same woman, you know, but that she's not angry. She is moving through the house. I hope that it is just residual energy that if Marta died in that house, that her soul, her spirit, her essence went wherever it needed to go, and it's not just trapped in that house. And I think it's really interesting that this woman who was in the house saw 3 different women. Who were the other women? You know, we've obviously got the lady in grey. We've got Marta, who is one of those women, but who were the other 2? The fact that we've got music, you know, you've got apparitions, you've got furniture moving around. Is Marta trying to make herself known? Is she trying to draw attention to herself within the house and be like, this is my house? You know, you don't belong here. This is where I belong. And my body maybe should have never been taken away from here. I also always love the addition in these stories, and with listener stories too, that people are like, you know, I woke up and these 3 women were sitting there and then I just went back to sleep. And you're like, wow, how did you go back to sleep? That is wild. I also think it's interesting that, you know, there's such a range of hauntings in this house. Like I said, you've got footsteps, you've got furniture being dragged, you've got people seeing the apparitions, you've got sheets being dragged off the line, you have got someone being physically thrown from a rocking chair. That's pretty aggressive, right? And I would love to know if it's possible that the men were experiencing more aggressive forms of the haunting, you know what I mean? And maybe the women weren't experiencing as aggressive haunting situations. The other bit of this story that gave me the heebie-jeebies was this idea of walking into somebody in a corridor. You physically feel the presence of somebody, but you can't see them. And way back in the beginning of the podcast, my friend Cass told a story about how she was in a theatre and she walked into somebody and was like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, that's how real she thought it was. She thought it was a real human being, and then she realised there was nobody standing there, but she had physically walked into them. Like, that is significant. That feels like a powerful entity, you know? And I do love the fact that Eric, when he was challenged by a journalist, just went, yeah, like, sorry, but weird shit is happening in this house. This is what's been going on. And I'm glad that the story became well known, because I think it's a really interesting story. I love the fact that, you know, stuff also gets transformed into a hotel. And can I say, 5,000 visitors in that hotel, like, the Vicarage is not that big. So the fact that it had 5,000 guests that summer is crazy. And I kind of wonder, like, when did why do we suddenly have a little boy haunting the place? Why have we got a hat man haunting the place? Why is there the ghost of, I know obviously there's the rumour that this 19-year-old girl got pregnant and, you know, was locked in that room. Unfortunately, these things did happen, you know, where people got pregnant by priests or nuns got pregnant or whatever, and it was considered to be a great shame, and reputation was everything. So, you know, it was never going to have a good outcome, is all I'm saying. But it did get me to thinking about the Hat Man, because, you know, I think about the Hat Man a lot. Is it a case of the Hat Man is attracted by other paranormal activity? The fact that people are going investigating this house, does that now mean that the Hat Man is like, oh, I've been summoned? Is that why the Hat Man has been knocking around? Either way, I think the Hat Man is a massive knob. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Again, I apologise if I pronounced things incorrectly. Please, by all means, send me vicious emails correcting me. If you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
Now at Verizon, we have some big news for your peace of mind. For all our customers, existing and new, we're locking in low prices for 3 years guaranteed on My Plan and My Home. That's future you peace of mind. And everyone can save on a brand new phone on My Plan when you trade in any phone from one of our top brands. That's new phone peace of mind. Because at Verizon, whether you're already a customer or you're just joining us, we got you. Visit Verizon today. Price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.